rheumatoid arthritis suddenly exploded, lupus, all these autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease, these exotic diseases nobody ever heard of when I was a kid. Now they're everywhere.
The only thing, I suppose, that could be more startling than finding out that numerous powerful political figures were attending parties of varying degrees of filthiness throughout the pandemic period will be to discover that the CDC have been holding secret meetings about the efficacy, concerns and potential danger of children's vaccines. A subject that, when mentioned even by bright lights of Hollywood like Jim Carrey, was enough to shackle and slow you down a little bit. What is going on when it comes to the subject of mass proliferation medications? Why is it that anyone that talks about it is treated as a threat and a pariah and likely subject to some sort of takedown? Well, thankfully, Bobby Kennedy, a man whose alliance with Trump gives me deep hope that we could be on the edge of disrupting something very significant when it comes to globalism and the real threat that we all face, had an interesting interview where he addressed the issue of children's vaccines, and in particular, what he claims was a CDC meeting about the rise of autism. Now, saying that on some social media platforms, I mean, I don't know, there are only emblems that could conjure so much condemnation, reappropriated Hindu emblems, I would say. Let's have a look at Bobby Kennedy and the extraordinary claim that there have been secret CDC meetings about the rise of autism from vaccinations. I'm not making that claim, of course, but autism has risen and so have vaccinations. Maybe there's a connection. I mean, I'm not a scientist.
So, there's a number of things that happened in 1989. But it's those diseases, all these autoimmune diseases suddenly appeared. I never knew anybody with juvenile diabetes. When I was a kid, a typical pediatrician would see one case of juvenile diabetes in his career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door has it. Something happened. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Rheumatoid arthritis suddenly exploded, lupus, all these autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease, these exotic diseases nobody ever heard of when I was a kid. Now they're everywhere. And so you have allergic diseases, you have neurological diseases and autoimmune diseases, and obesity suddenly appear around 1989. And so there's a number of things that could be blamed for it. Well, the CDC thought it may be the vaccine schedule. Let's check. So they looked at one vaccine, which is the hepatitis B vaccine. They looked at kids who had gotten it in the first 30 days, and then they looked at kids who had not gotten it in 30 days. In other words, kids who got it later or didn't get it at all. And they compared these two groups. And among the kids who got it in the first 30 days, there was I think it was a percent increased risk for a later subsequent autism diagnosis if you got in the first 30 days. Wow.
Remember, before he started talking about vaccinations, and I'm talking about childhood vaccinations, Bobby Kennedy was like a kind of political celebrity. He was an environmental lawyer. He went up against companies like Monsanto. That was in the days when people thought that globalism was bad, when people could come together on a subject like loving and respecting the environment and recognize that someone that put their reputation on the line and that was willing to work for such a cause was likely a good man. When Bobby Kennedy began to be outspoken on this subject, immediately, almost overnight, the entire media suddenly agreed. This guy's really bad. He's awful. What kind of things could we say about someone that would legitimize hating and condemning them? Here's a list of things. Almost as if there's a playbook. When any outspoken person rises up, how do we take them down? No one's perfect. We'll have to find something. And with all these extraordinary networks out there that appear to operate on the basis of ensnaring people into the peculiar world of dark erotica, it's very likely that people in the public eye could be ensnared. Extraordinary, really. Bobby Kennedy condemned as a whack job. Donald Trump condemned as a racist. That's not what people used to say about him, by the way, when he was a celebrity. People used to love Donald Trump. Donald Trump was everyone thought he was a great guy. We were looking at that elsewhere in our content a little later. Bobby Kennedy became hated because he spoke out against powerful interests. It's as simple as that. That doesn't mean that everything Bobby Kennedy says is true, but it does mean that you should probably scrutinize what he does say and calibrate it with other sources of information and look at who's opposing him and who likely pays those people, institutions and organizations. And also, when it comes to something like childhood vaccinations, maybe consider, well, what kind of tests are being done to demonstrate whether or not there is indeed a link between autism and the vaccine program in the United States of America. Who's going to pay for that? Is the government going to pay for it when they receive all that lobbying money and all of those donations? Maybe not. Is the pharmaceutical industry going to pay for those clinical trials? Maybe not, because they're the direct beneficiaries of it. Is the world of academia going to pay for it? Does academia receive massive donations? You know that the Nobel Prize, like the people that, you know that, right? I'm saying, like the Nobel Prize, the family that came up with the Nobel Prize invented dynamite. That's why they had to go, the people are associating the name Nobel with people having their limbs blown off. Well, it should be associated with excellence. Have a look at the people that fund galleries. Have a look at the people that fund colleges. Have a look at the institutions that back what you consider to be credible. Have a look at stardom and Hollywood itself. Peel back the veneer and have a look what's there, because it ain't pretty, baby. And Bobby Kennedy had it all. He's got that surname. He has those opportunities. You think that he needs this shit? So that, for me, that's a person you can rely on. We can't continue to bring you this beautiful content without the support of our partners. The Federal Reserve has dropped interest rates, so you need to call American Financing today. With mortgage rates in the 4s, it's the time to consolidate debt and reduce your monthly expenses. Many of us have been forced to use credit cards because of the ridiculous prices for groceries, utilities, and even childcare. Debt is really expensive, with credit card rates being insanely high, but with mortgage rates dropping now, it's the time to wipe that debt out. American Financing is helping homeowners save over $800 a month on average. Start today and you could delay 2 mortgage payments, which I guess is helpful if you are in a difficult, crushing situation in debt. If that's you, there's no upfront fee to find out how much you can save. Call American Financing today. That's 888-804-0303. That's 888-804-0303, or visit americanfinancing.net/Russell. There's a link in the description if that would help you out. Give it a go.
They immediately knew what was causing it. Oh, I know it was 11.35, so it's 1,135% increased risk. And so they knew immediately, it's called a relative risk of 11.35. If you have a relative risk of 2, causation is presumed. This was 11.35. The link between smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years and getting lung cancer is a relative risk of 10. This was 11.35. So they knew what it was. And then
think how long there was between knowing that smoking caused cancer and saying smoking caused cancer. And now what we have is the nightmare of an information maelstrom where good information can get out, bad information can get out, biased, bigoted information can get out, very particular subjective information can get out. And who is most likely to be able to control information? It's the people with the most money, it's the people with the most state authority, it's nexus of power, or nexi, I suppose, of power that form globally. Bureaucracies that have the same general interest in mind. Look out for these kind of things. Anti-protest law, anti-free speech, pro-censorship law for hate speech. Look out for general measures that negatively impact people that are able to, for example, grow food, like farmers. Look at anything that legitimizes the condemnation or even criminalization of whole classes and whole groups of people. Note it well, learn from it, learn about your enemy, wear their skin, live in their world and understand them, that we may oppose them and eventually vanquish them.
They had an emergency meeting that they called. They didn't want to do it on CDC campus because they thought it would be susceptible to freedom of information requests. So they did it in this remote retreat center called Simpsonwood, which is a Methodist retreat center on the wooded banks of the Chattahoochee River in a remote part of Georgia. And they had all of the big pangerums from the vaccine industry, from the pharmaceutical industry, from the universities, who are the ones who test the vaccines, from NIH, CDC, FDA, the World Health Organization, the European Medicals Agency, and they all got together for 2 days to talk about this study. The first day, and somebody made a transcript of it. And that transcript was given to me. And I published excerpts from it. But the first day, they're all talking about, oh my God, the lawyers are going to come after us. Nobody can deny this. This is bulletproof. There's no way to argue with this. This is real science. We can't, what are we going to do? The second day, they spent talking about how to hide it from the American public. And I published these things. Oh, then, I took a lot of heat at that point.
And how did that go for you, Bobby? Turn you into something of a hero, did it? People celebrate you and love you. Did it mean that the Democratic Party, under the auspices and stewardship of great and moral people like Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and AOC and Gavin Newsom and the Clintons and the Obamas went, whoa, this is a guy that's willing to go up against Big Pharma. This is a person that's not afraid to say dangerous things. This is what the Democratic Party is all about. Let's bring this guy right into government. Hey, he seems to have an appetite for leadership. Let's get him as the candidate. Joe Biden don't seem to be too well. If by unwell you mean getting jobs for your kids in foreign companies and in dubious nations, or not being able to remember the name of Indian prime ministers, or hardly being able to debate to a standard that would seem necessary for a man in his position. How about we back Bobby Kennedy? Or did they say, oh no, this person is anti-corporate. This person is anti-authority. This person appears to be opposing massive organizations, whether that was Monsanto when he was a lawyer, or whether it's the big pharma industry now, at the height of what would seem to some to be at least a crisis opportunely exploited in order to further legitimize authoritarianism and facilitate profit. He's the last person in the world you want out there front and center. And what does the Trump campaign do? They bring him on in for Make America Healthy Again. For a person like me, who culturally belongs to the left, a former denizen of that dark world of Hollywood, a former employee of mainstream media, a person like Bobby Kennedy, it's the sort of Democrat Party I thought we all believed in. Now I've had the scales fall from my eyes since then, and I start to see what interests are truly represented there. But Bobby Kennedy is exactly the kind of political leader that should be backed, listened to, empowered, and trusted. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments in the chat? If you're watching this on YouTube and you ain't turned on the notification bell, then hell, you ain't going to get the information that we're trying to put your way. Join us every day on Rumble, where we can speak freely at a time where free speech is being curtailed considerably. More important than that, though, please stay free if you can, baby. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.